This is The Speaking Show. I'm David Newman, and you're tuned in to the #1 podcast for speakers, consultants, and experts who want to speak more profitably. Welcome, John Garrett from thejohngarrett.com. I understand that in your previous background, you used to be simply a John Garrett, but now you've graduated. You are the John Garrett. Welcome to The Speaking Show.
Thank you so much, man. There are a lot of John Garretts out there. So I just had to designate myself as the John Garrett.
I love
JohnGarrett.com was already taken, probably by you, Mr. Domain Buyer Extraordinaire.
I do have that one. And then when I tried to sell it to you for like $25,000, you sent me some choice words that we cannot repeat here in front of the kids.
Right, exactly.
So you are a fantastic speaker and consultant and coach, and you talk about how to get the most juice out of our employees, specifically in the accounting and financial industry, by helping them bring their whole self to work. What kind of crazy idea is that? How did that come to be your expertise?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the John Garrett backstory and how you came to do what you're doing today.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I graduated from the University of Notre Dame and then went to work for PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC now. And yeah, how old do you have to be to have a company renamed? So anyway, yeah, so I was working with PwC and eventually went to industry, started a little bit of a hobby doing stand-up comedy just for fun. And I found that it made me better at my job. People could relate more. People were interested in it. They would ask me stories of what shows I had done and things like that. But I just thought, well, it's just a hobby, whatever. So fast forward, May of 2005, I ended up leaving corporate to do stand-up full-time, which I don't recommend to anyone. It's absolutely insane. It's very, very hard. It's harder than you think, times 10. But I was then speaking at a conference, and the meeting professional comes up, and she says, "Hey, do you know Mark Baumgartner?" And I was like, "I've never heard that name in my life." And she said, "Well, he knows you. He saw the list of speakers and right away said, 'I know John Garrett. That's the guy who did comedy at night.'" And I was like, "Who the hell is this Rain Man? And why does he remember? Like, do I owe him money? Like, what's going on here?" So I did the homework and found out that he was in my first PwC office 12 years before that. And he remembered me, and he didn't remember me for any of the work or anything on my resume. It was, a hobby I did for fun at night. And I never worked with him. He was in the tax department, and I have no idea how taxes work. So then I started just researching, like, well, was I the only one who had a hobby? No one really talks about him in the professional services world, the white collar nerd world that I was in. Come to find out, 92% of us do. So that's when I started interviewing people, started the What's Your And podcast, and, went from there. And yeah, it's just been cool to just shatter the stereotype of what people think of lawyers and accountants and consultants and engineers and bankers. And, we're not all work all the time. We have other dimensions to us. So it's been cool to see.
Now, talk a little bit about your speaking journey, because the record kind of skipped a groove, like over here. It's like, I'm doing full-time stand-up comedy, and I was speaking at this conference. So at one point...
there's a chasm there.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a break in there. Talk about how you got into this whole speaking thing, how that first came across your awareness, and maybe how you came into this whole, I can get paid for this? What's going on? Tell us about that transition from comedy to speaking.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I was doing comedy clubs full-time all over the U.S. And driving everywhere. On occasion, I would fly, but you don't make a lot of money, so you drive. And then people would see me at shows, and my act was always clean. And they're like, "You're really funny. You should come do our Christmas party, or you should come do our corporate retreat," or some sort of entertainment, basically. And so, I would. And instead of making, $50 for the show, I'd, make $500. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And that's gross. So I'm not bragging people, like, this is not a lot. And so, just started that way. And then I moved to New York City, just, elevate the game.
Where were you originally before New York?
Yeah, I was in Indianapolis.
Oh, that's a hotbed for comedy.
Yeah, well, actually, the Bob and Tom radio show is there. So that's a nationwide radio show that I've been on 12 times. And it's actually very centrally located. I mean, within a 2 or 3 hour drive, Columbus, Ohio, Dayton, Ohio, Fort Wayne, Louisville, Chicago. Indianapolis, of course. St. Louis is, just about that.
So you
Springfield,
could
Illinois.
get to a lot of places from there.
Yeah. Peoria, Illinois. I mean, yeah. And they all have comedy clubs, and it was a good place to be sort of centered out of. Yeah. And then moved to New York and was doing the clubs every night. And the comic strip on the Upper East Side was my home, and did stand-up New York on the Upper West Side as well.
So because I know the kind of speaking and keynotes and training and consulting you do now, which is all really focused on, employees and retention and getting maximum performance and results out of your people by tapping into who they are. How would you characterize your comedy act? Like, what was that like, or what was your main material focus?
I would say, is clean observational humor. The Office was huge at the time. So it was kind of like Conan O'Brien and The Office. A little bit of Jerry Seinfeld, Ray Romano, those kind of just clean observational humor. Like I had a really great bit about crock pots, the McRib, just dumb things I would see, like an environmental license plate on an H2 Humvee. Like, what's up with that guy? Like, what's wrong with you? Things like that basically, as a comedian, you see the world through a different lens. And so you have to paint the picture for strangers to see the same picture that I see in the shortest amount of time as possible. And you also get immediate feedback of whatever you think's funny. And maybe it's not, or maybe I'm not painting the picture right, or maybe I'll just never say that again. I mean, like that sort of a thing. And so you really get thick skin and you really get confidence in yourself. And unfortunately, comedy, similar to speaking, the only way you get good is by doing it. If you're in a band, you can practice in a garage and no one will even know that you even tried to be in a band because you realized that you were terrible. But with comedy and speaking, you have to get up there and do it. I mean, that's just it. And in comedy, if you're good or not right away. In speaking, I feel like you can get away with it for a while and not be good. Like to be
for sure
polite about it.
Now, I know what people are thinking. I'm channeling our listeners. Can you do a little bit of the crockpot bit?
Oh, the crockpot bit. Oh, man. Yeah, I have to remember it. So I was single at the time, and somebody had given me like a small crockpot. It was almost like a fondue sort of thing. It was a small crockpot. And I was like, I prefer to call it a stoneware slow cooker because it toughens it up. Like I'm a man, like it's not a crockpot, it's a stoneware slow cooker. And I've come to the conclusion that a crock pot is a microwave with a learning disability because they get the job done. It just takes them a little bit longer, right? Because I read in the recipe book, it said oatmeal 6 hours. And I was like, wow, who's cooking oatmeal in a microwave in 2 minutes when it can take a quarter of a day? Like vegetable beef soup, same recipe, 16 hours. 16. Now it becomes like a word problem from 5th grade. Okay, John wants soup at 6 p.m. That means that he has to wake up minus carry the one. Like I'm cutting carrots at 4 a.m. Like how good is this soup, right? And then not only that, but after you like go out the next week, all of your wardrobe's going to smell like that. And, it's like, wait, what kind of cologne is that? Oh, it's called bouillon. It's like just stupid. So yeah, that is still
that's so fantastic because of course, especially if you're in New York, so that would be a location specific joke about the way your clothes smell, right? Because your apartment is small, the kitchen is near the closet, right? If you're living in Peoria, it's like, why are the clothes smelling like the soup? I don't get that because the kitchen is here and my bedroom is upstairs. Right. Now, this is not the way they speak in Peoria. This is the way they speak more like in Tennessee. But I'm screwing everything up here.
Oh, don't worry. I've been to Memphis. I've done shows in Knoxville.
I'm just, I'm doing bad accents because that's at least politically.
No, it's and it's one of those things that, there is very location specific, like I used to do, some bits about like being in the college marching band at Notre Dame and, the McRib and, Arby's. And those do not work in New York City because people are either from Europe visiting and they don't know what that is. Yeah, we don't have fast food in New York. That isn't what people do. And so, it's hard. I mean, when you get up in front of a room of 40 people from like Sweden, it's like, I don't have any fjord jokes, so I'm not sure where to go with this. So that's when it becomes more, relationship type things. And, it just encourages you to write more and just, keep trying new things and pushing the limits on that.
For sure. Now, I want to talk about your fabulous new book. But before we get to your fabulous new book, let's talk a little bit about the speaking, because the speaking that you do is on the opposite end of a canned speech, right? So you do completely customized keynotes and seminars and trainings where you do a lot of research and preparation. You talk to the decision makers, you talk to the leadership team. Talk about the way that you approach these customized corporate keynotes that you do.
The way I look at it is there's sort of signposts that I'm going to hit along the way. In between there, I'm not totally sure what's going to happen. So I guess we'll all find out. But that takes, some confidence to be on the highest of the high wires and just go out there and do it. But I feel like the risk reward is definitely there. And it's so much more impactful to the audience to know that this is happening just for us, sort of a thing. And 80% of it is similar content to what I've done before. It's just the way you deliver it, the way you get into it, and keeping it fresh for me. When I used to do stand-up, I used to mix up my set quite a bit just because it kept me on my toes. The audience can tell if you're saying something that you've said 1,000 times. You have to say it in a way that's new and different. And so mix up the stories, mix up how you get into the story, like things like that. And the difference for me is I was in the audience for a lot of these things when I was at PwC and in my corporate life. And there's nothing worse than a speaker that comes up with a cookie cutter presentation that, hey, that has nothing to do with us. We're right here. Like, I can smell you. Like, that's how close we are. I should have watched this on YouTube. It's so frustrating. And these people are giving you their time and their attention on top of paying you, and make it worth it. And so that's why I like to do a little bit of homework to certainly customize it and make it for them. It shows that I care enough about you and respect you that you're going to have something here that's a for you only, and we'll never be together again. Me on stage and this exact group of people in the room in this location. That'll never happen again. So let's knock it out of the park, basically, is how I approach it. And then I also just try to create things that I would want to see from sitting in the audience, and I'm a pretty harsh critic of myself. So just to elevate the game and, just be better. It's easy to mail it in, but you're not going to grow. You're not going to actually make a difference and make an impact on people's lives if you don't.
Hey, good looking. Are you currently getting paid to speak? Would you like to ramp that up? We can help. Book a confidential speaker strategy call with our team at doitmarketing.com/call, and let's see what we might do together. The call is free, but the results may be priceless. Well, speaking of make an impact, let's talk about what's your and. Now, originally, because we've been friends for like 10 plus years, right? 2010, 2011, something like that's when we first met.
Yeah.
And originally, the concept was this whole green apple. And now that has been kind of renamed, reimagined, rebaked into this fantastic what's your and. Talk a little bit about kind of the genesis of the whole green apple idea, and then the shift into what's your and how that has taken on a life of its own with the podcast and the book and all kinds of other fun things you're doing.
When I started speaking, coming from the comedy world, where it's just a very strict rule. Either you wrote it or you don't say it. There's no stock stories. There's no stock joke. There's no stock lines. If you say it, then you wrote it. And if you're stealing it, then there's going to be a fight. Like, you're stealing from other people. When I see speakers use other people's stories or other people's models or other people's things, it makes me angry because is that person sick today? Why are they not doing that presentation? Why are we seeing someone else's quote on the slide? I want to hear your quote. You're the one on stage. And if you don't have any quotes about this, then maybe you shouldn't be the one on stage. That's my hot take right there. But that's what frustrates me so much about that, because just because you get up in front of people and don't throw up, that doesn't make you a good speaker. And it definitely doesn't make you a thought leader at all. And there's that phrase with thought repeater, I guess, which is so prevalent. And it's a real problem. It's a real problem because you're stealing. So I wanted to create something that was based off of my story. And I was definitely hypercritical of myself. And I wanted to make sure that, like, this is legit. Like, I'm either going to create my own thing or I'm not. And so, through the National Speakers Association, was talking at my very first conference in San Diego with Alan Stevens. It was like a human library, they called it. And that's where the cookies were. And so I was in a session and I was like, this is not a good one for me. So I left and then I went to go get cookies. And then whoever was working the human library is like, oh, do you want to sign up for us? Yeah, I guess. Do I get to eat more cookies? Sure, I'll sign up for it. And so I got not stuck with Alan Stevens. He got stuck with me. But it was great because I was talking to him and I'm like, I moved around a lot. My dad was in the military, so there's change, but I don't really care about that. And then there's these other stuff. And then there's this thing where, somebody had remembered me. And he's like, well, that sounds like something. And then I said, yeah, but I don't know if there's research. And he's like, well, why don't you do your own research? I was like, because I'm not old enough. Like, who does research? Like old dudes with patches on their elbows? Like, what? He laughed for about 3 seconds and then he was very serious. And he's like, no, do your own. And then you're on stage and you're saying based on my research, which now is a book. But yeah, so it's been a journey and it's just really push yourself to what is your own perspective? What is your own take? What is, your own flavor of something? And don't be David Newman light or Simon Sinek light or Brene Brown light. Like no one wants that because there's the real thing already there. So like be you. And if you can't, it's because it's hard. It's not easy and it's not for everyone. It's something that you can do if you push yourself. But it just frustrates me where it's like, oh, well, I talk to new speakers and I'm like, well, why do you want to do this? And they're like, well, because I saw so-and-so and I want to be like that person. No, you just stop. Just stop. Go get a job. Like, just stop. Because it's way too hard. Every single day, somebody punches me in the face. Every single day. Whether it's an email that doesn't get replied, or it's somebody in the audience that doesn't like what I have to say, or it's a review on, my book or whatever. Every day you get punched in the face. So you have to really, really believe this deep, deep down inside. And if you don't let it out, you'll go insane. That level of passion. And if you don't, then it's not for you. Which is fine too. We have plenty of speaking fans.
If you want to see the bottom of the depths of humanity, all you have to do is go to the internet comments and or Amazon reviews. There will be people that don't even buy your book, don't even read your book, and give you a 1-star review. I don't like this guy. He seems like a jerk. It's like, okay. And then you might think, oh, well, I'm sure there's a method that you can appeal this with Amazon going, they're not talking about the book. They're not talking about the product. They're not talking about the quality. No, it's stuck up there. That is your new 1-star review. And of course, it's the most featured positive review and there's the most featured negative review. The one that you hate the most and the one that's the most insane, done by some sociopath in their basement, that's the most featured negative review. Thanks very much.
No, totally. I don't even read reviews after I speak where they'll send you, here's what people say. I give them to my wife and I'm like, you read this and let me know if I need to know something because I was there. I've been on stage over 2,000 times. So when I'm on stage, I have antenna everywhere in the room, everywhere. So I can sense within a millisecond if something is off. One of my favorite was at a comedy club. And when you're in a comedy club, it's very different because the lights are so bright and the room is dark. So you can barely see the front row. After that, it's maybe some silhouettes, but really it's just darkness.
So this is before having any drinks.
Yeah, totally. Exactly. Which is amazing.
It's silhouettes, it's darkness, it's all very shadowy. It's very blurry in there. No, seriously, from the lights.
Yeah, right. No, John, you got to turn around. You're facing the bricks. Yeah, but I was doing a show and there was a woman there who had kind of a crew cut haircut. And so from the silhouette, thought I was a dude. And so I was doing some relationship jokes and somebody hit her in the back of the head. And so I said, why do you keep hitting that dude in the head? But I sensed it as the words were coming out. So it literally came out, why are you hitting that dude in the head? That's not a dude, is it? Because I knew immediately. Because the energy in the room shifted because everyone else can clearly see because they're in the dark. I know if something's off. I hang around and talk to people afterwards, which speakers should always, 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 always do. So if somebody really, really had a problem, I would know in the moment, I would know afterwards, and I would have taken care of it and we would have had a talk. It never happens, but I would know. And so, yeah, you get these reviews. And the last one I read, this is like, I'm not doing this anymore. It was in Toronto. And in between, this guy was amazing. He should have been first. And I'm never going to look at my people again. They're all awesome. So like amazing comments. In the middle was, I was really disappointed he wasn't Canadian. Really? Okay. Like, you know what? That was your big takeaway?
1 star. The room was too cold.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Because I requested that, like I'm Aretha Franklin, like I make the room freezing for my singing, like it's just silly.
Well, let's talk about what's your and. The podcast, the book, the whole empire that is developing around this fantastic theme and concept. Take it wherever you want. Podcast first, book first. Hit me.
Well, the podcast started first, so I guess that makes sense. And I came out of that presentation and I was like, well, am I the only one with a hobby? And started talking to people. I was like, well, I might as well interview people. And then if I'm going to interview them, I might as well make it a podcast because why not? And so, now over 400 episodes later, it's been pretty awesome. I'm actually doing now follow-up Fridays. So guests that were on 4 and 5 years ago, let's catch up and hear, what's new with your passions. How are you seeing this message play out in your life and at your work? And it's been really fun. It was very hard in the beginning. I would do all of it. I would record the podcast. I would edit the podcast. I would do the web page.
You mean edit the podcast with Phil?
No, on my own. It was pre-Phil.
Pre-Phil. Huge mistake, dude. What were you thinking?
No, totally. I was thinking I was broke. That's what I was thinking. And I was thinking, well, I'm smart. I can do this. And then you realize like there's a better use for my time doing other things. Plus, Phil's a great guy, so why not? Yeah, and so it was hard, because it was every Wednesday. And there were times where I would interview on Tuesday afternoon. And then I'm editing at night and then even in Wednesday morning, I'm putting it together, putting it on the page. And it was crazy. So it is hard. You have to be stubborn. You have to believe in what you're doing to persevere and get through that. And also just understand the difference that you're making, And the thing for me on the podcast was I was so into elevating the guests that it almost came across.
I never do that.
Exactly.
It's the opposite. I belittle the guest. I try and make the minimum amount of time that the guest can open their mouth because I just don't like that.
I've been on those shows too. Don't worry. And so somebody said, hey, it just sounds like you're a broadcaster that's interviewing people. And so drop in some knowledge there that shows that you know what you're talking about or you understand or, things like that. So that was a good tip for sure. And then it's just grown to where now, I have a team that helps me do that and it makes it so much better. The end product is significantly better.
What a great episode. Wowza. Tell you what, if you want to ramp up your revenue as an expert who speaks professionally, you should really check out our free online training at doitmarketing.com/webinar. So now the book is based on your research, you based on talking to hundreds of clients, obviously interviewing hundreds of people in the industries and the professional services world that you serve. What percentage was sort of podcast, raw material, versus kind of speaking and speaking related interviews and client stories? And how did you coalesce all of this in a fabulous book?
Yeah, so it's basically the war of art for professionals. It's exactly that. It's micro chapters. It's just cut to the chase. It's not a 12 chapter hardcover 50,000 word book. It's a 26,000 word book that you can read in 2 to 3 hours. And they're micro chapters. So if you're like, well, I'll read one more before I put it down type of thing, I'm excited about it for that because people will actually finish it. And again, it's creating something that I would want as an audience member. That's the kind of book I would want to read. And even in the intro, I say, you don't have time to read a long book and I don't have time to write a long book. So I'm just getting right to it, And so it's definitely irreverent, provocative, I guess. It's not a funny book by any means because I really wanted to establish myself away from being the funny guy. Unfortunately, people don't value funny. They don't necessarily appreciate funny. They think it's simple. And it's not. It's the hardest of the hard, and it should be the premium of the premium, but it's not. And so it's moving myself away from that and more towards thought provoker is my phrase because leader just puts a lot of pressure on myself. So it's about 80% from my speaking and consulting work. And then about 20%, I actually have pull quotes from 41 of my podcast guests that support what I was writing. So then it's not just me and my bubble world making up something. It's no, here's 41 different successful professionals in different professions. Actually, Australia, US, Canada, UK, Europe, South Africa. So it's just showing people that I'm not crazy. Well, I'm crazy, but like this is legit.
You're crazy, but not about this.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. The one thing.
Now, I'm going to make a prediction. And I don't usually make predictions here on the show, but I'm going to make a prediction. I hope you're sitting down. I hope you're ready. Folks at home, I hope you're taking notes. If you're in the car, for God's sakes, pull over before you grab the pen and the pad. What's your and is so catchy and so sticky and so hooky. I think this is going to be the next level of, you mentioned Simon Sinek a little while ago, right? And Simon, of course, start with why, right? That was his whole shtick, his whole campaign, his whole empire that started with a book and an idea. What's your and is the next start with why.
Oh, wow. Thank you, man. I don't want to let you down now.
I think you have tapped into something really, really important. And no, quite seriously, I love what you said about it. I did not want to make it a funny book. I wanted to make it a thought leadership book and a book that would really engage leaders in this conversation about treating their people like people and getting, maximum value from that person by giving maximum attention to that person. And, employee engagement, recruiting, retention, performance, all of these different things tied up. You make it accessible, you make it human, you make it simple but not easy. So these strategies that you talk about, it takes a big whole implementation team and you got to bring in 50 consultants. And no, you don't. You need to do what John recommends. You need to hire John to come into your company and do it with you if you want that option. And buy the book for everybody. Put this book in other people's hands, your entire leadership team, your entire executive team, and just stand back because this is going to be the next wave in the way that we manage people, especially if we're now managing people more virtual and remotely.
Yeah.
Right? Now they really can't be a disembodied face or a disembodied number on a spreadsheet. You need to tap into their humanity now more than ever.
Well, thank you so much, David. That means a lot coming from you because you've seen a lot of stuff for sure. And now more than ever, we've been in each other's homes. We've done virtual calls with each other. The artwork on my wall, what I look like when I haven't showered, what my kids look like when they're running around. And, let's not act like that didn't happen. We need to have a level of caring about each other, just a genuine interest in each other. And it's a shame that what we consider to be professional is really handcuffing, relationships when it comes to attracting and retaining talent, when it comes to getting good clients and engagement and all those buzzwords that are out there. It's really just simple. Just be genuinely interested in the people around you. That's really kind of you to say about, the Sinek reference, because I was speaking at a conference last year and there was a guy that came up to talk to me during the break. He introduced himself and then he got very emotional. And he said, I'm 60 years old and I didn't realize what you were talking about until 4 years ago. And I thought it was work harder, work more, make more money, more billable hours. And he's like, I missed out on so much. And he said, you're kind of the puzzle piece between Sinek's Start With Why, Brene Brown's Vulnerability, and Seth Godin's Purple Cow, Be Unique. It's not any of those things, but it's the puzzle piece that links those things.
Wow.
And and I was like, well, you're clearly a reader. And that just means a lot that it's totally different than the Start With Why. It's a different thing. And, just whatever we are, there's more dimensions to us.
Right.
We're and something else. And it's the and that people care about. No one really cares. I'm an attorney and, race motorcycles. Well, which one are we going to talk about? If I'm on a flight, and I don't like to talk to people on flights usually. So if I sit down and they're like, well, what do you do? And if I say that I'm an accountant, they immediately put on their noise canceling headphones. But if I say I'm a speaker and a comedian, well, let me tell you who my favorite comedian is. And I'm like, let me guess, not John Garrett. And then they go on and on about David Newman this and David Newman that. And I'm like, he doesn't even know he's a comedian.
Doesn't even know it. And you wouldn't know it either. So funny story about this, just I'll share this little quick personal story. Then I want to definitely have people connect with you, and we'll give them some links and some resources and some websites and talk about the podcast. So when I speak, I have a nice sense of humor. I make, an occasional joke. People have come up to me after like a half-day program or a full-day seminar. They go, "Oh, you are so funny. Have you ever thought about being a stand-up comedian?" And my standard stock response, I think you've heard me say this before, my standard stock response is, "Thank you so much for your kind words. At best, I am mildly funny. What you want is a mildly funny consultant. You do not want a mildly funny comedian."
Exactly.
Laugh and they get it. And then I don't need to worry about, you should go to stand-up comedy school.
Right.
So yeah, I am at best mildly funny. You, my friend, however, are hysterically funny and wonderful and amazing.
Oh,
Tell people, how do they get connected and stay connected to more John Garrett brilliance and the What's Your And podcast and the What's Your And book, and where can we send them? I want to link all of this up under the show notes right here under this episode.
I idiot proofed it for everybody. It's just what'syouran.com. What'syouran.com takes you to everything and makes it easy. Yeah, I have some music video parodies as well. Yeah, the podcast is super fun. Or if you know professionals that should be on that have a hobby or passion outside of work, I'd love to showcase them as well. And I've had everything from a guy that played minor league baseball for a couple of years down to, or not even down to, across to a lady that makes kombucha for fun in her basement. So whatever it is that you love to do outside of work, whatever lights you up. I had a guy on that referred to it as breathing and happy. And I was like, that's really powerful, breathing and happy. And I said, well, what about the IT audits? He's like, yeah, not so much. Not so much.
IT audits, not really breathing in happy.
Yeah. Yeah, you would think. That's what the brochure said, but apparently not.
That's what I signed up for, dude. Come on.
Exactly.
But John Garrett, thank you for being with us. This was tremendous. We have to have you back for more. All my favorite people come back for another episode, and I'll sneak you in.
Well, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. And don't tell everyone else.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.